he really wants something that is sort of serious and grounded, and he really wants love, and he wants to be loved, and he wants to give love. And the people around him in his kind of upper crust society are just, he finds them to be very sort of lacking in anything that is solid or substantial, and that frustrates him. And so it's cutting between his younger self as he's working through all of these emotions, and his older self, which is kind of very just disgusted by the world and just so tired, and just really, really struggling with being completely, feeling so alienated from a world that has just completely dismissed and ignored the experiences that he's gone through. And it intersperses, it's kind of jumping between different memories of his. So there's a lot of interesting editing where it's cutting between one experience and fading or to another one, or fading to some film reel footage of World War I, or there will be one of his poems overlaid as voiceover narration as he's kind of observing something about the world. And I think, it's just really, really beautifully directed, really beautifully edited. Jack Lowden, who plays the younger version of Siegfried Sassoon, gives an absolutely astonishing performance. So, I would recommend, if you haven't already heard of it or seen it, go check it out. It's a really, really worthwhile movie.
I'm surprised we haven't talked about it before. I don't think you even ever told me when you watched it initially, which is odd. I mean, not odd, but typically Geneva and I tell each other like everything that we watch, especially if we really, really like it. So,
it's one that I watched, and I really liked it. And then I thought I need to sort of sit on this a while and process it further and maybe watch it again. And so I watched it again, and then now I'm like, yes, this is a great movie, and I wish more people had heard about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you watched it again. And it's such a fun experience when you find a film that really, really touches you, and just, it's, when Geneva and I were talking about, making this podcast and what we wanted to call it, her and I both talked about movies being magical. And I feel like sometimes you just find a movie and it just creates magic for you. And it's, for each person, it's kind of different as to how that comes about and why it happens, but it's always exciting when that happens. So thanks for telling me about it, Geneva.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So today on the show, we will be discussing the 1938 film, The Adventures of Robin Hood, directed by Michael Curtiz and William Keighley, and starring Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland, Basil Rathbone, and Claude Rains. The film tells the story of Robin Hood, the English outlaw of folklore, who robs from the rich to feed the poor, romances the beautiful Lady Marian, and leads a band of merry men to take down the tyrannical Prince John and restore the good King Richard to the throne. Although this was not the first filmed version of the Robin Hood story, most notably Douglas Fairbanks played the character in a 1922 silent version, the 1938 version's iconic visuals and witty script are cemented in the cultural imagination as the definitive version of Robin Hood. And almost 85 years later, it remains the template for the swashbuckling action-adventure film. So, I picked this movie. This is a kind of a perennial favorite with me, with my family. I've shown it to a lot of friends over the years. To me, it's just a sort of a really fun, rousing action-adventure film you can share with people of all ages, kind of all backgrounds, find some enjoyment in it. But then it's super well made. And it looks great, after all this time, but it also has some really, beautiful and important themes too, to the extent that you can, in the sort of action adventure genre. But to me, this is just kind of the peak of the genre, and it's just a lot of fun, and I always love showing it to other people for the first time. So Tatum, what is your history, if any, with this film? Is this the first time that you have ever watched it? And what were your overall thoughts?
So I have zero experience with this movie. Had
I couldn't
never seen
remember
it
if this was
before.
one that I'd shared with you, so I guess not.
No, yeah, I'd never seen it, and Geneva, don't kill me, but I'd never even heard of it. I
Actually, wait,
remember.
let's start. Do
Okay.
you have any prior familiarity with the Robin Hood story, with the character? Any previous incarnations? Did you watch the animated Disney version growing up? Stuff like that.
So the only version of this that I've seen is the Robin Hood Men in Tights, but that, but that being said,
Wait,
I
that's
have,
amazing.
but that being said, I haven't even seen that movie in its entirety. Like it was always just,
Okay.
or not always, but sometimes it would be on TV, and it was just like, okay, I guess we'll watch this. I feel like, and I'm not saying this as a criticism whatsoever. I just think it's funny when these things happen. But I honestly feel like this, not necessarily this story, but all of the movies revolving around this story that like I've heard of or whatever that Geneva just referenced, I feel like they're very much so white people movies. Maybe I'm just,
You're not wrong.
yes. So yeah, this is not something that I watched growing up. So yeah, this was pretty much watching this. I didn't really know anything about it. Like I knew that Robin Hood is someone who helps the poor, and that was it. And I knew that Russell Crowe played him in a terrible
Oh
rendition
gosh.
directed by Ridley Scott that apparently sucked. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, so that's kind of my experience with it, which is zero experience.
Okay, yeah.
But in terms of my reaction to it, I found this movie to be a lot of fun. I don't I don't necessarily think that will watch it again, because it was something where like I enjoyed it, but it was also like, all right, I get it. But that being said, I do feel like I would have absolutely loved this movie as a child. I I am a big fantasy medieval sword fighting fan just in general. I read a lot of those types of books and watch a lot of those types of media. So I feel like the kid version of me would have eaten this all up and just loved it. So yeah, I enjoyed the film. I thought it was fun. I'm looking forward to talking about it because I feel like Geneva's, because she has a lot more like a deeper relationship to it. I think that as she leads the conversation, it will kind of remind me of things to say and stuff like that. But yeah, I enjoyed it.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad. Glad you had the chance to see it for the first time. So generally speaking, um, this movie was it was produced by Warner Brothers. So I'm just gonna did a lot of historical research, as is always the case with me. So I'm just gonna spout off a couple of trivia facts that I found, which were interesting. So Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland, two stars of the 1930s and 40s, and they were paired together in 8 movies total. The first of their pairings, which I think was Errol Flynn's first Hollywood movie, was Captain Blood, which I highly recommend to anyone who enjoyed this. Captain Blood is a lot of fun. Um, but the two of them just had amazing chemistry together, and so they ended up making a lot of movies together. Michael Curtiz was the director of Captain Blood, and he ended up being brought onto this movie to take over for William Keighley. The circumstances of Keighley leaving the production are not super clear. The official story, I think, is that he got sick, but more likely he was fired because the studio was not satisfied with the his ability to handle the action scenes. And Curtiz was very familiar with it since he had directed Errol Flynn in several action movies by this point. But anyway, yeah, one other fun fact that I found, well, fun for me, is that this movie was originally meant to star James Cagney. And if any of you know who James Cagney is, he's primarily known for two things, which one of which is gangster films, and the other of which is like song and dance musicals. He's this like extremely talented, short little spark plug of energy, who's great at playing like seedy gangsters or vaudeville musicians. And I cannot picture him as Robin Hood, but that would have been interesting. Um, Anyway, sorry. I I know none of this really means anything to you. I like trivia.
Geneva, this is your episode to host. So I hope these things mean something to you.
All right. Anyway, the other interesting thing that I read is that all of the archery in this film was, or at least the head of the team who performed the archery, but I think most of it was done by him personally, was Howard Hill, who was a professional archer. A lot of the shots of soldiers getting shot by arrows were done for real. They took extras and they basically just put a lot of padding on them and paid them to get
What?
shot by arrows by this master archer. And
This this relates to something that I'm going to bring up later, but
oh boy.
sorry, continue.
In particular, and this blew my mind, the splitting of the arrow scene was done for real. It's not a trick. It's Howard Hill just being an absolute beast and being able to literally split an arrow.
I wonder how many takes it took.
I know. I'm wondering that as well. I like to believe he just strolled up and
Definitely not one. It's definitely not
probably
one.
not. Anyway, so Robin Hood in general as a character, he is, he's kind of a staple of English folklore. He's very much set the blueprint, in my opinion, for later folk heroes like the Scarlet Pimpernel or Zorro. There's, it's very much the sort of action adventure swashbuckling genre, but I think there's also some DNA for the superhero genre as well. And this idea of a hero who's comes from the common people and is willing to stand up and protect those who are weaker than himself. This movie is very much trying to be more of a faithful adaptation of the legends and the folklore. And so it's unafraid to be very archetypal, which is one of the things I like about it. There's a simplicity to it. The good guys are good, the bad guys are bad, sort of a thing. A lot of the later versions of Robin Hood, like the Russell Crowe one that you mentioned, or there's a really terrible Taron Egerton version from 2018. They try to be sort of, very revisionist. Like the Russell Crowe one is like, this is, the real historical story behind Robin Hood. And the Taron Egerton this is, kind of quasi-modern, edgy, version of Robin Hood. And
I feel like Ridley Scott's tried to do that a few times, and every time he does it, it doesn't work.
That's the thing is like the reason Robin Hood works is because of it. It's a legend, it's folklore, it has to be larger than life. It has to be kind of inspiring in a way that when you try and tie it down to all this sort of, gritty historical realism or psychological conflict, things like that, it just strips away what is powerful about the story. So anyway, so let's talk a little bit about the plot of the movie. So it starts with, Prince John taking over the kingdom, and Robin Hood, or Sir Robin of Locksley, as he's known at the very beginning. So he's a Saxon noble. So he's one of the commoners, although a little bit elevated among them. But basically, he's got a rep already for being sympathetic to the Saxons and being willing to stand up against Norman oppression. And he sees a man being harassed and arrested for poaching to feed himself because he's starving. And he steps in and he rescues the man, and that gets him branded an outlaw. And the villain who he confronts over the poaching is Sir Guy of Gisborne, who's played by the wonderful Basil Rathbone, who just has a great sort of long, lean face for sort of English villainy. He played roles like that many times. Prince John is visiting Sir Guy in his castle in Nottingham, and so Robin Hood shows up, and they basically have a showdown where Prince John is like, "Yeah, I'm going to be taking over the kingdom since my brother's away, and I'm going to be raising taxes." And Robin Hood's like, "Yeah, well, I'm going to do everything I can to stop you," and gets him branded an outlaw. So, did you have any thoughts, Tatum, on the first part of the movie, on the setup, and then in particular that confrontation scene in the castle?
Yeah, I think so. For this film, I kind of took notes. I feel like majority of my thoughts actually have nothing to do with the plot. They just have a lot to do with the filmmaking itself.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd love
Because
to
for
hear
me, maybe this is a bad thing for me to say, Geneva. I know this movie is very special to you, but to me, the plot did not really capture me as much as the filmmaking did. So I was kind of like, okay, the story, blah, blah, but look at the visuals.
it.
So I feel like as far as the plot goes, like I said, I don't have too many comments on it. But if we're just talking about like my initial thoughts in the opening parts of the movie, I think so. One thing that I wrote down was I think one thing that I struggle with whenever I watch movies. This is just any movie in general, but I don't like it when movies start with like words that you have to read because I always get so stressed out that like what if I don't read it fast enough and then it goes away. So then I read it so fast that I don't actually process what it says, and then I'm like, oh, wait, I have more time. Let me go back and read it again, but slower this time. And then I miss it. So, anyway, with any movie, it's always hard for me when it opens with like a title card or something like that because I just get stressed out. Like, will I understand the stakes? Will I be able to read it fast enough?
That's funny.
With this movie, I did have to read it twice, but I did
Well, that's
understand
good.
it the second time around. But yeah, I think one of the first things that I wrote, actually, the first thing I wrote after that was there is absolutely no way this movie was made in 1938. I refuse to believe that this movie was made in 1938. I just I don't know how they did this. I mean, I'd love to go back and look at like because I've seen a lot of movies from this time period, but I've never I would love to look at this history or the history of that time period of movies in relation to this film because I don't know if it was like ahead of its time or if things were like this were happening at the same time or what, but I was incredibly impressed by the production design, and they had all of these big I don't because you can tell right that they're printed backdrops, but at the same time they're still I mean they look really good, and I found that like a lot of the props were not real, like the food and things like that in certain cases, but they created such an amazing space that made it feel real, even if the props themselves were not. I was very impressed with the wardrobe. So yeah, I mean, I have lots of comments throughout the movie in terms of like how it was made or how it looks. I have thoughts about the stunts. I have thoughts about like just the camera movements and all of that stuff and animal wrangling because I don't think animal wrangling even existed back then, so a lot of these animals were probably being abused.
Most
But
likely.
yeah, but anyway, yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I guess I'll just stop there because blah. But
Yeah, no,
yeah, I
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one thing about this movie. It looks incredible. I believe this was the first or one of the first Technicolor movies that Warner Brothers had done, and it just looks so beautiful. As I was doing research, I was seeing things about like the director having people go and spray paint the trees so that they would look even more richly green than they
Can
actually
you
were.
imagine?
Hmm.
Because I did some research on this too, because I was so impressed with the color. I was like, how did this work? And apparently it was supposed to be in black and white, but they switched it to color 2 months before they started shooting, which, yeah, last
Yeah.
minute decision kind of, but whatever. But I was watching this movie and I was like, I cannot imagine watching this in black and white. I feel like so much of the movie, I feel like the colors are a character in this film. And I feel like if this movie had been in black and white, I would not have enjoyed it as much. I probably would have been bored, to be honest, because visually it's just so engaging. And without that color, even though it was a last minute decision to add color, I think it was the right decision. So kudos to the film crew for making that 180 turn.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I I certainly also can't picture it in black and white. It's so vibrant. There's this beautiful, beautiful shot very early on in the movie when we're first seeing Prince John talking to Sir Guy, and they're drinking wine, and they go to kind of, he goes to like pick up a paper or something like that, and his elbow knocks this wine glass off the table, and the wine is dripping onto the floor, and it looks like blood. And just the lighting of it against the dark red of it. I mean, it's a very obvious symbol for what Sir Prince John is about to do to England, but it looks so beautiful. This is also one of the movies that, I get very picky, or not picky, I guess, but I get so frustrated how many movies set in the Middle Ages there are where they're like, oh, it's the Middle Ages. They didn't have color, right? Everyone just wears brown all the time, And it's like, no, color is great. People did have color back then. They loved color. And the costumes in this movie, they're not strictly historically accurate, but at the very least it's a much more, I think, vibrant portrayal of the Middle Ages, and very true, I think, at least to the spirit of the sort of fantasy folklore elements of this movie.
I will say though, I feel like whether it's historically accurate or not, I feel like the tights are a bit much for me. I just there's old men in tights, there's young men in tights, there's middle-aged men in tights, they're leaping over tables in tights, they're laying on the ground in tights. I'm just like,
it's a lot of tights.
I mean, couldn't they just give Robin Hood tights and no one else?
Well, hence why it is really funny to rewatch this movie. I've seen Robin Hood Men in Tights many times, and it's just really funny every time I rewatch this movie and I think about certain scenes that are parodied in Men in Tights, specifically the scene where he recruits all his merry men and they have an assembly line set up to give out portions of their costume, and the last station is the tights.
I need to watch that movie again. It's been a long time.
It is not one of Mel Brooks's best, but I enjoy it. There's just some really, really hilarious scenes. Carrie Blaze, of course, is always great.
Always great. I love him.
Yeah.
I was about to say R.I.P. and then I'm like, no, he's definitely still alive.
Don't jinx it.
I'm like, isn't he only like 60 something? He's not that old.
Oh, yeah, probably not even that. He was just in a Netflix Christmas movie last year, so he's still doing great.
Oh, well, we all know how much I love Netflix Christmas movies.
Wait, I'm sorry, you didn't see Carrie Elwes' Netflix Christmas?
No.
Where were we? Oh yeah, we were just talking about the visuals. Yes. The one caveat that I have to say to the amazing visuals is, and I don't know if you agree with this, but for me, every single one of Maid Marian's costumes is like the ugliest thing I have ever seen. I don't know why what the costume department had it in for Olivia de Havilland, but the color combinations that they put her in are just so hideous, and it's very unfortunate because otherwise she's perfect. But yeah,
I feel like there was one dress that I liked, but I don't remember which one it was. I remember seeing one of them and I just thought I liked that one, but
there was the one,
could not tell you.
Yeah, there's the one that she's in that's sort of blue and white. I think it's at the archery competition. No, not that one.
Fun fact, I couldn't watch the archery competition. I had to look it up on Wikipedia because my DVD was super scratched because I got it from the library.
Oh no.
I was able to watch the rest of the movie, but the archery competition I could not see.
That one cut out.
I don't know what dress that was.
Did you not see the splitting of the arrow then?
No.
Oh, all right. Well, an arrow gets split. It's pretty impressive.
I believe it.
All right.
I don't know. I don't know if, I just want to add something because I've not seen this movie before or any iteration of Robin Hood other than Men in Tights, which was a long time ago and not even the whole movie. I don't know the names of anybody. So I'm just going to say that guy who did that thing that one time or whatever. First of all, I love that Robin Hood has a guy who just travels around with him for the sole purpose of playing music.
Yep.
I mean, I think he contributes other things, but I'm pretty sure his main job is just to create vibes,
I
which
mean, don't you have your own
like
dedicated minstrel?
yes, but they can actually play the instruments. He's like so fakely play, like he's not even trying. He's just moving his hand up and down. But anyway, I don't know if it's the character or that actor's performance, but he was so creepy. He was very, very creepy
The
to
guy who
me.
plays Will
Like,
Scarlet?
I don't know what his name was. The music guy, he was hella creepy to me, and I was like, oh, I don't know what's going on, but I don't know. I think you might have someone locked in your basement.
Oh
I
gosh.
don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Does he come
My
across as creepy to you at all, or no?
No, not particularly. Just kind of that we're
Okay.
talking about the musician, right? You said?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he just comes across as very like bland. Um
Okay.
like he's the one where it's just like he's kind of a pretty boy and that's kind of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I
yeah,
don't know.
not in a creepy way to me, but yeah,
Yeah.
I mean
I don't know. He was giving me creepy vibes. Either way, he's not a real person, so it's fine.
yeah, it's fine. My favorite thing about Will Scarlet is the fact that when, after Robin has recruited his band of merry men and they're all in their, uniforms of green and brown to blend in with the trees, Will Scarlet is still wearing bright red hat and the little cape thing because apparently red is his brand. So he just can't be without it.
Gotta stay true to the brand. Speaking of staying true to the brand, I feel like part of Robin Hood's brand is and should always be having his hat on. He should not take that hat off because his hair
Not a fan of the
is
1930s
so
pin curls.
no. Like every single scene where he takes off that hat, I'm just like, oh brother, put it back on. I know it's not practical to always have it on, but good grief. Get a new hairstyle or something. This is a bit much.
Well, actually, since we're talking about about it, what are your thoughts on? I'm assuming since you haven't seen this movie before, you probably haven't seen any other Errol Flynn movies before. I've never shown you Captain Blood or anything like that.
I don't think so.
Okay, so yeah, what were your thoughts on Errol Flynn, if any, on his portrayal of Robin Hood?
Oh, Errol Flynn is the actor. I was like, is that the director? I don't know what's going on.
No.
I literally don't know the names of anyone in this movie. I don't know the director. I don't know the actors. I don't know anybody.
I believe he's played by Jude Law in The Aviator, one of your favorite movies.
Who's Jude Law? No, I'm kidding.
No, Errol Flynn is the actor who plays Robin Hood. He was an action star of the 1930s and 40s. Okay. Australian originally, I believe.
Okay. Fun fact about Geneva and Maya's friendship. Geneva, I don't know if you remember this, but I think it was a few years ago. Geneva told me, she was like, "Oh yeah, that's right, Tatum. You don't know actors," and I was like, "Correction, Geneva. I know lots of actors."
Did I say that?
Yes, you did. You're like, "Oh, Tatum, I know you don't know actors." I'm like, "Yes, I do. I just don't know every single actor that has ever had their face on camera ever." Geneva has like a crazy talent. So I have this weird talent where I can just like remember entire movies. Like I could quote all of like, even if I've only seen a movie once or a TV episode once, I can quote things that no one else should know how to quote. Geneva, like she watches a movie once and there's some background character who's there for 10 seconds. And she's like, "Oh yeah, that's so-and-so. And he went from there to do something, but then he died and blah, blah. I'm like, okay.
Did I ever tell you that my brother made a cartoon about this, making fun of me for this exact reason?
No. Oh, I need to see that cartoon.
To see if I can dig it out and show it to you. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Because I'm like that with my family too. And my brother is like, like my whole family to one degree or another can do this. And my brother was just poking fun of the fact that he thinks he I mean, he's pretty knowledgeable in movies, but then he goes home and hears me talking to like other members of my family. And he's just like, yeah, I apparently don't know anything.
Yeah. I'm very knowledgeable of movies, but I think it just doesn't go back as far as it does for Geneva. And also I remember like directors and cinematographers and production designers and all that stuff. But anyway, you were asking about apparently the actor who plays Robin Hood. You were asking about his performance. What was his name?
Yes,
Errol
Errol
something?
Flynn is his name.
Errol Flynn. Yeah, I wrote down a few notes on his performance. I thought it's to me it almost felt like his performance was progressive for that time. I feel like I didn't really see actors giving performances back then who are very like he's super charming, but not in a classic like hello, can I buy you a whiskey type of charming. Like he genuinely is like no, I'm hot and I know it. Like I don't know, I just he just seemed he was very charismatic, very charming, very full of himself, but like somehow not in an annoying way. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed his performance. I thought that he brought to the character a really good balance of being super pompous, but also being really humble and helpful depending on the scenario. And I feel like they might have mentioned this in the movie at some point. I don't remember. But wasn't he like offered some position at court or whatever of like being a higher up lord or something, and then he gave it up and he was like, no, I'm gonna help the Saxons or whatever. And so I think you can see that both sides of that in him of like he can be this highbrow whatever and be sarcastic about it even, but then he can also be this gentle kind soul who cares for people who are starving or people who are, dying or can fall in love with a woman that he just met or whatever. Yeah, I liked the character of Robin Hood, and I also I really liked Errol Flynn's performance a lot.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. Because for me, I mean, there's so much about this movie that I love and I think is great, but I think it's really one of those movies that rests on the shoulders of its lead actor, and I think he gives a fantastic performance. I mean, I would not say, I've seen a couple Errol Flynn movies. I don't know that I would say that he's like an all-time great actor or anything like that, but it's very much, this is a movie star performance. He just has so much charisma and he makes it look so effortless. And it's a character that, in the hands of someone else who is not as charismatic, it could be very bland. It could be very cloying. The character of Robin Hood, he's not flawless. He does have flaws, but he's not one that changes over the course of the movie, which is something that I find really fascinating about this movie and the way that it's structured is, it's a movie that is centered around Robin Hood, but Robin Hood does not have the character arc. Maid Marian does. She's the one who is we're basically seeing Robin Hood in a certain way through her eyes. And as she's becoming aware to the plight of the people who are around her and aware to the of the injustices that are happening in her country, she's becoming radicalized, and we're becoming radicalized along with her. But the person who's doing that radicalization, it has to be this person who has, just such a insanely, charismatic but also inspirational, personality. And I think he just embodies that really beautifully. He's so he's so commanding on screen, so you want to follow him, but he has this goodness to him. You feel like you can trust him. You feel like he's very genuine when he says that he wants to help people. But then at the same time, he's very cocky. He's very sassy. He's very confident. He's a little bit vain. Like that's one of the reasons that he's able to get caught later in the movie. But he's just so full of life, and that's one of the things I love about this movie, and why I think, again, this version of Robin Hood really works where a lot of other ones don't. Is that when they try to make it more sort of historically accurate, or more sort of kind of psychological conflict, things like that, it just becomes very dour. And this Robin Hood is not dour. He loves life. He loves doing good. He loves helping people. He loves outsmarting, the rich guys, and like he's so playful. There's so much mischief and so much life to him, that it doesn't become boring. It's so entertaining to see him playing with the villains, and you get a little bit stressed. Is he going to be able to get out of it? But of course he is. He's Robin Hood. And I think that's the thing that really makes this movie work, is all those different elements that just make him so engaging to watch.
You mentioned how he's inspirational, and one of the notes that I wrote down was, I'm pretty sure 90% of this movie is Robin yelling things to get an enthusiastic response from his followers. There are so many scenes where he's like, blah, 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 blah. Am I right? And everyone's like, ah! Like, just like it happens over and over and over. And that's not a criticism. I just thought it was funny how many times that happened. And I also wrote a note that was Robin's ha 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 ha. Like there were so many moments. He's like, ha ha ha
Yeah.
ha 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 ha.
He's like a jolly
Like
Santa Claus. He just bursts out
I know.
laughing.
I remember when I wrote down ha 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 ha, I almost thought I should write down ho 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 because I was like, he sounds like Santa Claus.
Yeah, he really
um,
does. But
and I don't know if this was something that you picked up on Geneva or if this was just kind of part of my experience, but I also noticed that a lot of this movie, and it's not just Robin Hood, it's kind of everyone. People talk very fast. Sometimes they say things and I'm like, I literally need to rewind because I have no idea what you just said.
well,
I
the
don't know.
movie's
It
only
felt
90
like
minutes.
yeah, I mean, it felt like almost Amy Sherman Palladino, like Gilmore Girls rate talking or something. I was like, I don't, that was so fast. But also, you're a minor character, so it couldn't have been that important, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, oh, I also have to, while we're on the topic, just have to show some appreciation for the scene in which Robin crashes the party that Prince John and Sir Guy are holding at the castle. This is very early on in the movie, where and it's such a cool image where they hear, oh, Sir Robin of Locksley's outside, and they open the doors, and he's got this whole deer carcass on his shoulders, and he's beating up guards with it. And then he turns around and just swaggers into that castle room and plops it down on the table. And it's just so good. I love that scene so much. The how, he's so cocky and impudent and he's like, yeah, I can get out of this. I've just decided to stroll in and tell you that I'm going to organize a revolt against you. And Prince John at this point does not realize how much of a threat he is. So he's all overly polite. He's like, "Oh, please sit down, pull up a chair. It's fine." And then they basically both state their two positions. And it also contains the line I love, which I think is the best line in the movie, where I think it's Maid Marian, or no, maybe it's Prince John. I don't remember who. But someone says to Robin, "You speak treason." And Robin goes, "Fluently." And it's just such a good line. And I love it so much. Anyway. Did any.
So,
Yes, go.
so you made me think of something while you're talking about like, because this whole scene, right? They're obviously gathering around food and all that stuff.
Yes.
This is, I think, I almost wonder if they did this as a joke. I feel like they probably did, but there is so much. I don't know if it's chicken legs or turkey legs. They're way too big to be chicken legs, I feel like. But there are
I
so
think they
many
said it was
scenes.
mutton, which is sheep.
It's like there is just so much eating of legs. And there's a whole moment towards the end where there's like a close up shot of this cook or baker or something picking up this chicken that's just come out of the oven and like carrying it over for it's like we don't need that shot, like that does not need to be there, but yes it does because this movie is all about the meat. Like,
Yeah,
there's
meat
so
is
much,
just like
like
a
so much
recurring
meat.
motif. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, yeah, so Robin faces down Sir John. Sir John tries to capture him, but he manages to escape, which is pretty impressive. There's a nice little shot of, as Sir John is talking, the guards are kind of getting into position, and Robin is kind of watching them through the corner of his eyes, and you see him kind of calculating the best way to make his escape. He manages to do it. He rides off. And then there's just a long section of the movie where he's basically recruiting his little group of friends. He first comes across Little John, who is ironic name because Little John is huge, and there's that great scene where they're both on a bridge trying to cross, and they decide to do some sort of bow staff fight for no real reason apart from just wanting to show off, I guess. But Little John bests Robin and sends him into the water, and Robin is delighted by that. And that's another thing I love about his character is he's like, yeah, I love it when I find people who can do things better than me. This is great. But yeah, so Robin starts to amass a following. He recruits Little John. He recruits Friar Tuck. And he gathers a whole bunch of peasants to a clearing in the forest, and he gives this speech about how, they're being oppressed by these, taxes that are overburdening them, and Prince John is trying to usurp the throne, and they need to remain loyal to King Richard, and that basically they're all going to gang together and help the oppressed and the weak and fight back against the tyranny that they're experiencing. And this is one point in the movie where, and this is kind of my little personal thing that I love to do, which is watch all movies from the late 1930s and early 1940s in the context of World War II. But this movie came out in 1938. 1 year.
And when Geneva says watch all the movies that came out in the late 1930s and the early 1940s in the context of blah, blah, she literally means all of the movies released in the late 1930s and early 1940s. You guys think I'm kidding? Literally go look at her Letterboxd.
Oh. Not enough of them. Not enough. There are many, many gaps. But anyway. But yeah, so this movie came out a year before World War II started. So audiences would have been very, very familiar with the rise of fascism that was happening around the world, in particular Hitler and the Nazis in Germany. And I was so struck by, just this movie in general, I think is, it is very much can be read as a sort of anti-fascist, just generally resist tyranny and help those who are weaker rather than preying on them. But in particular, I was very struck on this watching by when Robin leads the people in this oath. He puts up his hand in a way that is kind of reminiscent of a Nazi salute, but the intent of it is to do something.
I picked up on that too.
Okay, yes. I'm glad it's not just me. The intent of it,
is that meant to be like that? Yeah. It looks like Heil Hitler.
Yeah, I believe he's holding up the wrong hand. I believe it's the left hand instead of the right. But the idea behind it is he's leading them in this salute, but it's a salute to something that's completely opposite to Nazi ideals. It's, value and protect the weak, it's resist tyranny and oppression as opposed to giving into it. So I just thought that was kind of a nice little thing in there, and very much a reminder that the sort of message of this movie is one that is evergreen. There's tyranny in England in the Middle Ages and also in Europe in the 1940s and many other times and places. We're always in need of some sort of a Robin Hood figure, some sort of inspirational figure who can, not be the savior of the people, but be inspiring the people to do what is right.
Geneva, I look forward to the day when on this podcast I can suggest that we watch a movie that is a Spanish film that either takes place during or reflects the realities of the Spanish Civil War, because then I can be like, so this is the history of Spain and how the Civil War affected this, and
Yes.
Franco did this, and how the artists retaliated in this way, but it was subtle, and blah, 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 and the people responded in this way, and blah.
Oh, please. Oh, that would be so much fun. Anything by a lot of Guillermo del Toro's, isn't Pan's Labyrinth set around in the Spanish Civil War or right before or something like that?
It is. But girl, I'm talking about like some 1940 like Spanish movies. I've seen Spanish films from all decades. If you study Spanish and film in college, you will watch lots of Spanish movies. And the film history in Spain goes back a lot farther than people think. But anyway, that's a huge tangent. But yes.
Yeah, no, that would be awesome. Oh, that'd be so good. Yes, so Robin Hood is now, he's got his band of merry men, he's got his friends, and now the movie focuses a bit on the romance aspect. So Robin met Lady Marian, who's a ward of King Richard, and she is sort of tentatively in an arranged, supposed to be in an arranged marriage with Sir Guy of Gisborne, but Marian's not super thrilled with that idea. But Marion at the beginning is very, she's very resistant to Robin. She's just like, oh, he's an outlaw, he's just a thief, just a criminal, like, um, he's not someone worth, spending my time with. But then Robin and his merry men, they ambush a treasury, they're transporting tax revenue to add to the treasury. Theoretically, this money is supposed to be going toward the ransom for King Richard, but of course, the Prince John wants to keep it for himself. But while they're captured, Robin and his men basically they dress up the men that they captured, particularly the Sheriff of Nottingham and Sir Guy of Gisborne. They're forced to wear all of these rags, and they throw a banquet. And so there's this just huge feast that they all enjoy together. And Marion begins to soften toward Robin. Robin takes her to see some of the peasants, and she sees the circumstances that they're living in. How poor and thin and hungry and tired they are, and how grateful they are to Robin for everything that he's been doing to protect and provide for them. And she realizes that she's completely wrong about him. He's not just some sort of criminal who's out to do these things for his own enrichment. He actually is someone who cares about the people, and they begin to fall in love. So yeah, so and as I mentioned, I really really love the character of Lady Marian. Olivia de Havilland, of course, is a wonderful actress, and she really manages to make Marian not just a sort of two-dimensional damsel in distress. You really see that she's this intelligent woman who's she's forceful. She has her convictions. She's willing to act on her beliefs, and the two of them just I think have a really sweet chemistry. And you really see as the movie goes on that they're well matched for each other. They both are able to. They both have skills and strengths that they bring to the table, and yeah, I really love the romance between them and the character of Marianne and what she's able to contribute. And as I mentioned too, like I really love the fact that the movie is structured around Marianne's eyes being opened and her coming to, changing from just sort of a wealthy woman who's very divorced from the actual realities of the world, and what, she's been told her entire life. And her eyes being opened to the fact that there are people who are less fortunate than her, people who are suffering from oppression and injustice, and that she can't just sit back. She needs to do something about it. So, yeah, Tatum, any thoughts on the character of Maid Marian or Olivia de Havilland's performance? Maybe not specifically this section of the movie, but just in general.
Yeah, I enjoyed her character. I felt like I feel like a lot of this movie was very, in my opinion, everyone was kind of over the top. The villain is very much so a villain, and then Robin Hood is like ha 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 ha. Yeah, I just felt like everyone was very over the top and loud, and not that that's a bad
Yeah, I
thing,
mean,
but
it's
I
kind of the
found
acting styles of the time, that very theatrical style.
Yeah, but I found Marion to be very subtle, but not in a way that made her that diminished her importance or her relevance at all. I actually think it's the opposite. I think it made her stick out to me even more because she's able to command the screen, even though she is not screaming at you to like pay attention to her. So yeah, I really liked that character. I liked the performance. And I also thought the chemistry between her and Robin Hood was I felt like it was pretty real feeling. I find that romances are kind of harder for me to relate to because the acting is just so different in the 1930s than they would be like in the Before trilogy nowadays, for example. So it's a little bit harder for me to connect with them. But that being said, I did feel that there was chemistry between the two. And I remember there were a few specific moments with the two of them that I really enjoyed. I really liked the scene when Robin Hood like climbs over the window into her quarters or whatever you call it. I just felt like I don't know. I was going to say it's kind of cliche to have someone like climb up the castle and go through your window, but maybe in 1938 it wasn't cliche. I don't know. But at the same time, it was very romantic, and I really liked. I found the character of Bess to be funny, and I really liked
She's
how
great.
when Marion asked her to leave, she was clearly disappointed. Like she wanted to stay in the room to kind of see what was going to happen and all of that stuff. And Marion was just like, "No, no, you could go." And Bess just thought, "Oh, okay, I
Marion had
guess
a bit
I'll."
of like, Mom, leave me alone energy to like,
Yeah.
let me and my boyfriend be alone, you know?
Yeah. Bess is super interesting. I feel like she's got this whole other life going on that we only get glimpses into. Like the fact when she slaps that guy and then kiss or no, did she kiss him and then
I
slap
think she
him or
slaps him and
whatever?
then kisses him, yeah. Her
Yeah,
little
I'm just
flirtation with
thinking,
Bess.
what is going on with this Bess lady? She's got her whole other story going
Yeah.
on. I wanna know what she's doing.
Well, as she says,
Um
she's had the bands out 5 times. So she's a
oh
popular lady.
yeah, that's very true. But anyway, yeah, I enjoyed her character. I thought that she was really good balance in comparison to everything else. I liked that a lot of the other main characters were very just expressive. Not that she wasn't expressive, but she was more of a subtle type of performance. So yeah, I liked that a lot. I thought that it was they played off each other very well.
Yeah.
And I feel like I feel like I could see them being together in real life. Like these different types of people, it's a good match, like you said, Geneva. I feel like they go well together.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, the Sir Guy and the sheriff and Prince John together come up with the idea of capturing Robin Hood by sponsoring an archery competition, with the idea that Robin Hood is very vain about the fact that he's the best archer in England, and this will lure him out, which works. Robin does show up in the world's weakest disguise, which kind of cracks me up. Of course, he wins the competition.
I'm sad I didn't get to see the disguise.
Yeah, it's basically just his. I mean, he's basically just wearing his normal clothes, except with different colors. They're like gray and red.
But like his face isn't covered
His
or
face is
anything?
not covered. No. He
What?
has a hat that's sort of at an angle, so it's kind of covering one eye a little bit, but that's about it.
That's all you need, Geneva.
Yeah.
If you've got a
I
hat
mean, it's
that
the Middle
partially
Ages. There's
covers
no
your face,
photographs.
then
But of course, as soon as he walks onto the pit,
people don't have eyeballs either.
yeah,
People can't see.
exactly. But yes, anyway, there's a great sort of a scene as he's going through the competition. He's about to win. He knows that he's walking into a trap, and there's a scene like there was earlier where he's kind of looking out the side of his eye at the guards getting in place ready to capture him, and clearly he thinks, I fought my way out once, I can do it again. But this time it doesn't work, and he is actually captured. He's thrown in jail, and this is what spurs Marion to finally take the first step into helping Robin. And so she's the one who she goes to the merry men, and she comes up with the plan to free Robin. And the plan works, and Robin is freed, as he goes to see Marion, as you said, in her chambers, and they have a very sweet love scene, which I liked a lot. But yeah, so with all of that, then we go to King Richard, who is back in England. So King Richard, I think I mentioned before, but if I didn't, he is the rightful king of England, and he's been away fighting the Crusades, but he was captured. And so this whole time, Prince John has been like trying to take over the country on the pretext of, well, while my brother's away, I'm going to rule the country. And then he's trying to find excuses to keep his brother away. And then finally he's like, I'm just going to assassinate my brother so I can be king. But so The
Classic sibling story. Very, very
yes,
classic.
classic siblings squabbling over the throne.
You try to just resist, and then eventually it's like, well, guess the only way out is just kill him.
Yep. Haven't we all been there?
Yep. Geneva and I are actually recording this podcast from prison.
Yes. Yeah. Which, by the way, I don't think I ever told you this, but I was listening to a book on tape.
That you went to prison?
Oh, yeah. Didn't I tell you? About my time in the slammer? But no, I was just going to say, I was listening to this book on tape about the Wars of the Roses, which is, this is a later time period. This is like the 1400s, I think. But this is this English sort of long-lasting war that broke out between these two noble families in England, and all the nobles had to like pick sides, and they were squabbling over who would get the throne and things like that. And it was used by George R. R. Martin when he as inspiration when he was writing all the politics of Game of Thrones, and you can really tell. So if you're ever in the mood to look up some
I love
real
that.
life history, yeah, look into the Wars of the Roses. English monarchy is fascinating. Anyway,
Okay.
but yes, different time period than this one.
Yeah, I should probably learn some real world politics rather than more Westerosi or other fantastical histories.
Well, you can learn both.
For the record, I do know history things.
No, I know. Well, clearly you know Spanish history, which I know zilch about. I know that there was a Spanish Civil War because I was reading a book about
Indeed.
American history, and they mentioned that a lot of Americans were going over to help with the Spanish Civil War, which I found really fascinating. But apart from that, I know nothing about Spanish history.
There's so much there, but I will not go into it because that is literally not what this podcast is about.
Yes,
we can do that off. We can do that off the mic.
We can do it off mic. Sounds good. Okay. So we're kind of wrapping up the plot here. So King Richard is back in England. It is discovered that he is in England, and Prince John sends an assassin to kill him. But Marion overhears. So Robin asked her to run away with him and get married and live in the forest. And she wants to because she loves him. But she says, your cause is now my cause. And I can do much more good by staying here and actively working behind the scenes to help you. And so she gets to do that. She overhears about this assassination plot to kill Richard. And she manages to get word out that this is happening. But she is discovered and she's arrested and she's sentenced to death. So Much the Miller, who is one of Robin's men, he is able to cut off the assassin and prevent him from killing Richard. And I actually really like the way this is filmed because there's this really neat little action scene that Much gets where he comes upon the attacker and they're struggling and they're fighting, and then it fades out without actually showing the resolution. And we have another scene and then we cut back and Much is on the ground and he's really badly wounded. And we don't know right away whether or not he succeeded. But then I think it's Will who finds him, and Much is like, don't worry, he's not going to kill anyone. So it's just this nice little moment of heroism for a character who's mostly just a sidekick or a comedic relief. But yeah, so Robin kind of randomly comes across Richard and tries to shake him down because he thinks he's just, another one of the Richard is in disguise and he thinks he's just a corrupt clergyman. But he discovers about this assassination plot and he's like, that's okay. All right, we're going to go and we're going to protect Richard. We're loyal to Richard. And then Richard's like, all right, don't worry about it. I'm here. And he reveals himself.
I'm me.
Yep. Takes off his robe. There's the Richard the Lionheart symbol on there. And then the two of them basically team up. They pool all their resources and they go into the castle and they prevent Prince John from being coronated as king, and they rescue Maid Marian, and all is well. Robin has a really great sword fight with Sir Guy of Gisborne, which is just iconic and wonderful because Basil Rathbone is an amazing sword fighter, and he and Errol Flynn, they look so great together. The cinematography, there's this one great shot where the camera kind of pans so you see the shadows of the two of them against the pillar fighting, and then it moves back and you see them again, and that shot, that idea was used in a lot of other movies. It looks so good. It's so cool. But anyway, sorry, I'm talking a lot. Do you have any thoughts on this sort of latter part of the film, filmmaking or otherwise?
I wanted to mention that I want to read you all of the separate bullet points that I wrote throughout this movie that had to do with the stunts.
Oh,
The
please.
first one is in all caps, the stunts. The second one is the stunts of the men falling from the trees are insane. The next one is I'm pretty sure all of the jumping onto the horses is real and therefore would not be allowed nowadays. And then I have some outrageous stunts throwing throwing full-size wooden bench tables over balconies.
Just chucking furniture right and left.
I wanted to note that like there's just so
Yeah, the stunt
the
work in
stunts
this movie
really
is
stood out to
amazing.
me in this movie. I think that it's really impressive, but I also think that, I do think there was animal cruelty going on, but um I love I did really, really like the choreography of this kind of climactic battle that's happening between these two people. And I thought the choreography was strong, the cinematography, there were some really great shots in there. But Geneva, don't kill me. I will say throughout this movie, there are several scenes that I'm like, this is way too long. This is way too long. It does not need to be this long. This whole sequence kind of before the battle actually breaks out of them just going through this procession to enter into this, it was so long of them just walking into the room. And then this last fight, again, like I love the choreography, there's some great shots, but it's also like 7 minutes long, which coming from a movie that is quite short, 7 minutes is very long, which I don't know if it's actually 7 minutes, but it felt like it was forever.
Yeah, that's all right. um, yeah, actually, this is unrelated to that, but I just have to say a word in favor of how much I love the script just in general, because there are so many little witty lines and jokes that I just really enjoy. The characters are just constantly teasing each other or constantly saying these kind of beautiful, very theatrical things, which, yeah, it's very enjoyable to me. And also,
So,
oh no, go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead. I was just going to say, speaking of funny little witty lines and jokes, I was desperately hoping that you would put this as your opening quote for the movie or for this episode, but you didn't. That's fine. But I was like, whoa, that is really, really saucy for 1938. The last line of the movie, when Robin Hood says, "May I enjoy all of your commands with equal pleasure, sire."
It's a great
I
line.
wrote that line down. I was like, that is really, really saucy. Like, even nowadays, I feel like that's like, whoa.
Girl, you have
Because he's
not
like
seen that many
commanding.
1930s movies.
I don't know.
But yes,
I
it is
just feel like
very
it's
saucy and
very,
delightful.
like, it's very almost explicitly saying, like, I will enjoy, like, I will take pleasure in this woman, but also, like, you commanded me to do it. I don't know. It's like it's a really weird dynamic, but also I kind of love it because I feel like it's so I don't know. I just feel like it's a great final
It
line for
is.
that character. Just like his final, yeah, I still got it, guys. Like
Mhm.
we might have just like won this rebellion, but I'm still the same person that I was. I still got my jokes. I still got all.
Yep.
Now I just have my woman and apparently a command from my king to take pleasure in her. Which, hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Um, yeah, I love that line. So good with the little.
Was it even in the running for you for the opening quote or no?
I didn't.
I'm just
Yeah, I didn't
curious.
think of it.
Okay.
But I was, you know, it's always difficult to figure out what direction you want to go for the opening quote. I feel like so many of the movies, the lines in this movie that I love, they're little quips, and so they wouldn't really work outside of context. And so I was trying to find one that's a bit more, in line with the theme of, his sort of, his mission to stand up against oppression and whatnot. But there's so many little like funny, witty quotes that I would have loved to do, but I don't think they would have made sense at the beginning. But anyway, there's the whole scene where he's fighting with doing the staff fighting with Little John, and he's like, Little John's like, "Oh, I should give you payment for how much I'm teaching you today." And then Robin gets a hit in. He's like, "Oh, here's something on account." And then Little John's like, "Here's your change," and just knocks him off the bridge. Like, it's just so good. It's so good. Anyway,
Yeah, I would have loved this movie as a kid. I feel like I would have thought it was the coolest thing ever. It's got a lot of great jokes, and yeah, it's very entertaining, and it's very, like I said in the beginning, this movie is very fun. It's very
yeah,
fun.
yeah, it's
Fun for the whole
fun for
family.
the whole family. So yeah, everything ends happily. Richard is back on the throne, and he's made this promise to restore justice to the kingdom. All the traitors are laying down their arms. Robin, as you noted, has been ordered by royal command to marry Lady Marian, and he's going to enjoy it. And so the two of them run off, and that is the end. One thing that actually occurred to me while we were talking about the final fight is just a word in praise too of the villains of this movie. Basil Rathbone he's just one of the all-time greats. I always enjoy seeing him in movies. He was in Captain Blood with Errol Flynn. They had a great sword fight in that movie as well. He plays an over-the-top French pirate, which is great. But he's also very well known in his career. He played a lot of villains. He was a villain as well in The Court Jester. He had a great sword fight with Danny Kaye there. But he was also very well known for playing Sherlock Holmes. He played Sherlock Holmes in a bunch of standalone movies, and he's got this great sort of long face that really lends itself well to that kind of sort of British or aristocratic, kind of smarter than everyone else, slightly sinister, but also really compelling. And yeah, just really love Basil Rathbone. I forget the name of the guy who plays the Sheriff of Nottingham, but I find him really funny. He's just so incompetent, and he's always, "Oh yes, of course. If I could only reach my sword, I would surely strike him down." And everyone else is just like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, dude." And then Claude Rains as Prince John is just, he's just so hateable. It's great. But any thoughts on any of the villains? I know you don't know any of their names, but just
I literally could not name one of them if you paid me. And I'm not kidding when I say that. It's like I literally have like the IMDb list up over here of like all the characters and the actors, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, I don't even know which of these characters are. It says their names, and I know that Robin Hood is Robin Hood, and I know that Marion is Marion. Everyone else, I'm like, you could be a villain. You could be I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't really have too many comments on that. I definitely liked the comedy that existed within this movie. Sometimes it is a little bit much. I do get annoyed sometimes with just large groups of men repeatedly being like, but yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the dynamic that this group had, and I liked how I don't know. I just liked how it showed that Robin Hood just created a vibe amongst his people, if you can call them his people, like his followers of, we're all doing something that's very difficult, but we're also going to laugh in the midst of it, and we're going to find joy. And yeah, I liked being able to see that. So, and I think this is a really nice turnaround because last week we talked about Straight Outta Compton, which is like a pretty intense movie.
Yep.
It's almost the exact opposite of this movie.
Yep. And could not be further.
And so, yeah, so I like that we're following up that movie with something that's genuinely just fun and lighthearted, and yeah, it's just a bunch of people, living their lives and finding joy in the midst of struggle. And I think that that's great, and it's admirable, and it's fun to
Yeah,
watch. So
absolutely. And there's, it doesn't, to the extent that it can, both for the time period and for the genre of the movie, it doesn't shy away from the fact that there is darkness to it. There are a lot of montages of just peasants being harassed and manhandled and arrested and beaten and tortured by the guards. Like, it's not shy about what's going on. And so I think, like you say, that does make the humor and the sort of joy and laughter to what Robin Hood's mission is, to what he's trying to create, all the more powerful. For him, it's not just about kind of restoring to Richard to the throne. It's about this vision for the England that he wants to live in. This England where the vulnerable are protected and valued, and everyone can have what they need, and people are in community with each other, and they enjoy each other, and they affectionately tease each other, and value each other's strengths and contributions. And it's just this really beautiful, attractive vision for how the world can be. And yeah, I think that's one of the things that's so powerful and so timeless about this movie, is that it is kind of this sort of inspirational and beautiful and fun vision of like what we want the world to be, and how we can act and try and make it more like that. All right, so with all of that said, so this movie was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. It won 3 Oscars. It won for Best Score, which is highly deserved. I really, really love the score of this movie. And there's actually a really good YouTube video out there by this YouTube channel called Sideways. The YouTuber goes into the use of leitmotif in Robin Hood. And it's really interesting. So if you're interested in score or interested in learning more about the score for this movie, I would highly recommend that video. It also won for Best Editing, won for Best Art Direction, which is very well deserved. Again, as we said, some of the use of color and scale models and production design and things in this movie just look fantastic. This movie was inducted into the registry of the National Film Board of Preservation.
Sorry,
Yep.
Geneva, can I just say something real quick?
Go for it.
I just thought about this. I found it interesting that this says Best Art Direction, which I'm assuming at some point they switch it from art direction to production design.
That's my assumption too, yeah.
But it makes me think about the way that film crews break down now, and if it was still like that back then, because now on film productions you have the production designer and the art director, and they're 2 different positions, and obviously like they work together, but they're 2 separate positions. So I find that interesting. Like, at what point was it art director first and then they added on production designer, or did they both exist? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I thought that was interesting. And it came to my attention because this won Best Art Direction. I was like, oh,
well, that's really interesting. Anyway, maybe there was a separate production design award at the time. I don't really know. What is the role of the art director as distinct from the production designer?
So the production designer, they're the ones who like design the idea of the set. So it's like, okay, this is, the church, and we're going to have benches here and windows here and yada, yada, yada. And then the art director, they kind of, so the production designer, I think, tends to work a little bit more closely with the set deck department. And then the art director tends to work more with the construction and paint side of things. So I'm sure that, I don't know if anyone's listening to this that works on film sets, but if there is anyone that is like an art director or a production designer, they're probably like, everything you just said was wrong. Because I've never been a production designer or an art director. I've only worked with them and kind of observed what they do from the outside. But I think that that's kind of how it breaks down. Like, the production designer is the art director works underneath the production designer. So the production designer is like their boss. So I think the production designer is more of like the larger scale of like, this is the room, this is the idea. And then they kind of delegate fill it with, whatever. And the art director kind of works with like the construction side of things.
Okay.
Anyway,
Interesting. That's so cool.
yeah. Yeah. Set designers are yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Blah 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 blah
No,
blah.
no, that's
Now I'm
okay.
just
It's
trying to
cool.
like
I did not know that.
now I'm just trying to like talk and make sure that I'm not saying something wrong because I don't want it to be like, oh, she says she works on film sets, but actually all of her information is incorrect. So I don't know. This is just my experience.
Well, if you want to break in for corrections, feel free at any point.
Yeah, feel free to shoot me super mad emails saying like, Tatum, you're wrong. You should quit the film industry because you don't know what you're talking about. And I'll say, you're right. I don't know what I'm talking about. But also, no, I'm not quitting.
Well, all of that sounds reasonable to me. I would not be able to tell if you were wrong, so I'm just gonna take you at your word. Okay. So in 1995, this movie was inducted into the Library of Congress's National Board of Film Preservation, so kind of declared a significant historical film. This movie, for a movie that's 85 years old, it's kind of difficult to go off of
100%.
Rotten
What?
Tomatoes or Metacritic. There's 50 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes at the moment, and it is 100% fresh. And then Metacritic, it's 97%. But yeah, so obviously this is a super old movie, so it has its status as a classic. Like there are not a whole lot of people who are going to be out there saying this movie is trash. At the time, though, it was received overall very positively by critics. It was a hit for Warner Brothers, made money. I took a look around. There's, not a whole lot of reviews from that time out there, but there are a few. One that I found is a Variety review. It says, it is cinematic pageantry at its best, a highly imaginative telling of folklore in all the hues of Technicolor. So, very positive there. Roger Ebert wrote something about the movie in 2003. I think when the movie first went onto DVD, I think that was why he wrote about it. But I always love what Roger Ebert's reviews, and I thought he had some really good writing about this movie. So he said, "The Adventures of Robin Hood was made with sublime innocence and breathtaking artistry at a time when its simple values rang true. In these cynical days, when swashbucklers cannot be presented without an ironic subtext, this great 1938 film exists in an eternal summer of bravery and romance. We require no Freudian subtext, no revisionist analysis. It is enough that Robin wants to rob the rich, pay the poor, and defend the Saxons, not against all Normans, only the bad ones." So I thought that was very, very well stated. He also had a point about the Robin and Marion love plot. He says that their scenes are so simple and direct, they made me reflect that modern love scenes in action movies are somehow too realistic. They draw too much on psychology and not enough on romance and fable. I thought that was a really interesting point.
That's like it's like the opposite of what I said before.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I can connect with the more realistic stuff, like the Before trilogy, even though that's not entirely realistic, more so than I can this 1938 thing. But apparently, Roger Ebert and I feel love in different ways.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something to be said for something that is like there are reasons that folklore and mythology endure for so long, and it's not because they have all of this psychological depth. It's because they speak to kind of deeper, larger, more archetypal impulses and emotions and motivations that people have. And so, you know, when those are accessed well, when they're displayed well, as I think they are in this movie, by two actors who are very charismatic and sensitive in their portrayals and have real chemistry, then you can kind of tap into that, that and feel it, and there's a sort of larger, mythological, aspect to it that you're kind of entering into, which is not, not every movie needs to be that. Like there also needs to be space for something like the Before trilogy, where it's much more detailed and granular and psychological, and there's this kind of realism to it, and that's why you tap into it. We can access characters through different avenues, I think. And so I love this movie because it's doing this one thing that, movies nowadays don't really do very often. And I think it's a thing that's very, in this case, very effective. And I would love to see done more. But it certainly doesn't need to be the only thing that movies do. So anyway, yeah, a little bit of Roger Ebert's thoughts, which are, as always, very, very good. Um, so, with all of that said, any wrap up or not, any thoughts on anything else of those two critics quotes that I read before we move on to the part of the movie that moved us?
No, I'm glad that I'm very glad that it won the award for Best Art Direction. I think that that was extremely deserved, even though I probably haven't. Well, I don't know who else was nominated in that category. Maybe I have seen some of those films, but I don't know. I feel like this was just very, very, very strong. So I'm glad it won that. It was well deserved.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Which now I'm very curious to see what else was nominated that year. Anyway, all right, so let's talk about. Well, I will share the part of this movie that moved me, the thing that kind of cemented it in my heart and mind. Which is always is a little bit difficult to pin down because there's a couple things that come immediately to mind. But I think I really connect, as I said before, with Marion's storyline in this movie and her kind of emotional journey from a sort of, sitting back and remaining willfully ignorant to discovering larger and darker truths about the world and wanting to do something about it. I think it's a really beautifully done, and I love this, the way this movie is able to create this hero who is genuinely heroic and inspirational and kind of draws you into that larger struggle. I think it's well done, but at the same time, I also love the color and life that this movie has. As we've said, it's very funny, it's very witty, it's very exciting. Like I think, minus maybe one or two scenes that could have been a little bit long. I think generally speaking, it's very well paced. It's very action packed. Things move along quickly, and I think that makes it really timeless. And it's so much fun to watch. It's so it's so funny and charming, and just it really enjoys being a movie, and the characters really enjoy being playing their roles. Like Robin Hood loves being Robin Hood, and that's one of the things when you watch an action movie, you want to feel like the character is having fun in a way, because you want to put yourself in their shoes, and I think that really helps you to connect with that movie and then connect also with the larger themes. So yeah, that's not really one moment, but that's kind of some of the overall vibes of the movie I really connect to. So yeah, was there anything about this movie that really connected with you?
Um, I mean, I feel like I just sound like a broken record, but I was I was just really impressed with how well made this movie was, considering the year that it came out. I mean, the sets are really impressive. The wardrobe, even though it clearly, was made a long time ago, it still looks great. I just feel like I I wonder what the budget was for this movie and how that translates to now with inflation and everything. Because I feel like this must have been a high
Yeah.
budget. I mean, because I just feel like you can see the money on screen. Like it was utilized very well. I mean, there's so many background actors and so many things that are done practically. And there's some really impressive cinematography of like cameras filming horses galloping at full speed. And I was like, how did they do this in 1938? How many camera operators died getting run over by horses? Like, I don't know. But yeah, I think that's probably going to be the main thing that I remember about it, because like I said, the plot wasn't bad, but it wasn't really what engaged me. It was more so how the film looked and the artistry that went into making it come to be. So yeah, I just think incredibly, incredibly impressive. So, and I'm very glad it was in color and not black and white. So I think that's kind of the main thing that I appreciate about it and what I'll remember.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I remember reading when I was doing the research for this that this was the, I think, most expensive movie that Warner Brothers had ever made at the time. I don't remember what the actual figure was, but
I wonder how they managed to get all that
they
money.
really splashed out. Well, they're a movie studio. They've got a lot of money lying around.
No, I mean like how did this film get that money from Warner Brothers to have it be made?
Oh, like
But
what?
also old time Hollywood was very different in terms of how it functioned and things got funds, so
Oh
maybe it was
yeah,
different.
yeah. I mean, studio system. If this was a movie that they believed in and they were putting their A+ actors and directors and everyone toward it, then it was going to be an A-list production, which clearly this was. By the way, just for context, this movie came out the year before Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. So for context in terms of color cinematography at the time, this was the slightly before those two, but around the same time period.
I don't think I ever realized those two movies came out in the same year.
Yeah, I know.
That's crazy.
Right? Yeah, yeah. So Wizard of Oz has a sort of timeless quality just because it's so iconic. Like it's rewatched so often. I feel like it does seem strange to me sometimes to think that it came out in the 30s.
Speaking of movies that have been rewatched often.
Would you like to reveal next week's movie?
Yeah. So next week, speaking of movies that are very highly watched and also movies that are fun for the whole family.
Absolutely.
next week I have chosen for us to discuss the film The Sound of Music. Yeah, I'm very excited for this discussion. It's a movie that I have seen. I can't even count how many times. I'm sure Geneva's seen it same as many times as I have.
Yep.
So it'll be a fun discussion. Geneva is she is the musical lady. So I'm excited to kind of dive into a musical with her for the first time on this show. And so yeah, we're hoping that you guys will come back and listen to that one
Yeah.
with us.
Great pick. I'm so excited about this one.
Yeah, Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer. What more do you need?
Spend 5 minutes on conservatively, we could spend a lot more time on their chemistry alone. All right. Yeah. So very excited about that one. And that's it for now. Bye, everybody.
See you guys next week.
Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at yourpickpod@gmail.com. Our theme song was composed by Joel Rushton, and our podcast graphic was designed by Kara Shin. If you like this show and want to hear more, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. Until next time.